Hi, this is Aaron Eisberg-Nog from Star Trek Deep Space Nine, and you're listening to Beyond Trek. You can follow them on Twitter at Beyond Trek Pod and on Facebook at Beyond Trek Productions. Thanks for tuning in, and may the Great River provide.
This is Beyond Trek Podcast, your source for Star Trek on social media and around the web. I'm BigJ.
I'm Watney.
And I'm Dag, the Trivia Master. You can find us on Facebook at Beyond Trek Podcast and on Twitter at Beyond Trek Pod.
Red alert.
It's another recording here of Beyond Trek Productions. I'm here with a friend of mine, Ed. Ed, say hi. And of course, I'm BigJ. And today, now, Ed and I went to high school together. You were a class of 95. It was 95. Okay, I knew.
I remember your parents buying you that yellow Ford Splash F-150 pickup truck.
It was red. Yeah, red pickup truck. I don't know.
No, it was yellow. Because it was like the only one in the area that was yellow.
It was red.
Was it red?
Definitely red. Oh yeah, yeah. Red's my favorite.
Because you parked it right there. We had to walk by it every day, and we were just like freaking football players. Got to park his truck right where the co-op guys need to park at for school.
yeah. And well, and I have to. You have to excuse me on anyone who's watching this. The lights in here are horrible for someone with a freshly shaved head. I mean, look at this. It's like just this reflection, so bright you can see the future. So,
as opposed to the person going gray at every spot,
It happens to all of us. So Ed, we're going to be talking about Star Trek, of course, and you do some fan fiction.
Just a little bit, yeah.
Okay, all right, so you're on fan fiction. So we're going to talk about that. But first, here's what I'd like to hear. How did you get involved in Star Trek? What started it off for you?
Well, as every young boy who grows up watching, I think it was the cartoon that I first saw. And
the
then,
animated series?
Yeah, and then I don't know, I remember watching it in the afternoon, but I can't remember which restaurant.
Mm-hmm.
Now we're finding out the mic is in the wrong spot. That's usually the problem with me.
That's okay.
I forget when the motion picture came out, they had the iron-on patches and stuff.
Right. Yes.
You're too young to remember that, I know.
Right. But yeah, motion picture was 79?
Yeah.
Yeah, I was 2. So
yeah. I was getting Big Macs. I want to say it was McDonald's, but someone told me it was Burger King.
One of those.
And it came with the kids meal.
Yep. And
then I had for like the longest time a t-shirt that had like the Enterprise thing ironed on, and I was like running around, do this, make it so. I remember the Next Generation came out. I remember watching that when first the pilot episode came on Fox.
Yes.
Because that was, I think, after X-Files.
I was there. Yes, remember the series premiere of Next Generation, which was, at the time, it was really cool because I started in 82 was when I got onto Star Trek, and I was with watching Wrath of Khan. Used to come on HBO, and anytime it was on, I would always watch it all the time.
This is how we know that your family had more money than mine, because I was watching things on Saturday morning. So if anyone who's not old enough to know what we're talking about, because Saturday morning after the cartoons came on was the 3 or 4 hour block or a couple hours anyway, or 3 or 4 movie block of things. So you watched, they'd have Star Wars on, and then they'd have Star Trek on, and then Ice Pirates and
Ice Pirates,
Battle Beyond the Stars.
Yes.
And then you were just like, oh look, Clint Eastwood next weekend. How wonderful. I think that's where I saw the Fistful of Dollars and stuff.
Okay.
Movies.
Okay.
But anyway, so we didn't have HBO. I do remember Star Trek 4, Search for Spock, when it came on, and watching it going like...
Three was
Search for Spock.
4 Voyage Home.
No, Voyage Home, that's the one I'm thinking of. The Voyage Home when it came on. And I was sitting there watching it going, that's not the Enterprise.
They're flying around in this bird of prey.
No. The CVN 65.
Right.
That's not the Enterprise, because I don't know if you're familiar with this or not. Top Gun was being filmed at the same time. Mm-hmm. And they ended up having to swap ships for the filming because the Enterprise, I'm trying to remember the goofiness to it, but all the patches that all the pilots wear in Top Gun say USS Ranger.
Mm-hmm.
But the Ranger is in Star Trek 4, which is why when they run through the hangar, you see U.S. Ranger on all the aircraft.
Oh.
And the island is the island for the Ranger, not the island for the Enterprise. And then they put the Enterprise in Top Gun. And I've heard stories it was like deployment issues, and then the other thing was Top Gun paid more money to get filming rights on the Enterprise.
Right.
Pardon me.
I didn't know that, and I mean, you know, I'm not in the know on the ships like you are to know that. But that's good. That's good trivia.
Enterprise is like way noticeable. It's the only ship with a square island on it, or a conning tower, because it was part of they were going to have a nuclear fleet, which was it was like, so was it 64 or 63? I forget, 62. Enterprise. There was the Enterprise. There was, I forget the name of the frigate, and there was a destroyer, and they all kind of looked the same on the tower, which is the square kind of box.
Okay.
And then they realized how expensive they were, and they were going to, and what they weren't going to do is, like, I don't know if you're familiar with the White Fleet, but the White Fleet was the steam fleet for the U.S. Navy, and they did a world tour. It was like Teddy Roosevelt's time period. So they were going to do the nuclear fleet and travel around the world. Mm-hmm. Well, the first problem was a lot of countries said no. You're not bringing a nuclear, reactor into our waters. We don't know how safe this is. We don't know if you're dumping water that's radioactive. Mm-hmm. So then the next problem was the cost and maintenance. Okay. So the frigate and the cruiser were decommissioned, and in fact they didn't. The Enterprise sat as the only nuclear carrier for a long time. It had, because I believe it's decommissioned now, 8 reactors instead of 4. And that was so they could do training operations and stuff. And the ship itself is just very weird. To save money, they actually built it on top of the hull, or the frame of the USS United States, which was going to be the ballistic nuclear bomber or carrier that the Navy was building at the time, and then the Air Force got the ballistic bomber rights from the government. Okay. So they just had this thing sitting in a dry dock, and they're like, yeah, why don't we put some reactors in there and make a nuclear carrier? So it's the only flat bottom ship. It was the fastest ship in the fleet because they had so many boilers and so many reactor plants. And then they did the Ranger, the Kitty Hawk. They did 4 carriers after it. Okay. And they're about the same size as the Enterprise. They look like Nimitz class carriers. If you saw one, you'd be like, "Oh,
right,
any different."
Right. Yeah, I didn't know any better just seeing that. Yeah, I say, yeah, that's Enterprise. But it's not.
What ended up happening was that the electronics in fighter planes got so advanced that the smoke coming off the diesel engines were clogging up radar and computers and all that stuff.
Gotcha.
And the only ship that didn't have the problems was the Enterprise, and they realized, it's the nuclear reactors and not with no smoke. So then the Nimitz class came about, and then they started getting rid of all those ships, like the Ranger and the Kitty. Kitty was still in service, I think, up to 2006. Okay. And then they decommissioned her because the Japanese went and said, okay, you can park a nuclear carrier in our waters. We know it's safe and stuff. Mm-hmm. So, but that's where that all went away.
Gotcha. Wow.
Yeah, pretty neat. A little too much Navy trivia for everybody.
Yeah. Anyone likes some good Navy trivia, there it is. So, tell me about the fan fiction that you're doing.
Well, I think what it was when I first got started on this, I just got tired of the continuity problems. Mm-hmm. And
Star Trek and continuity problems? No.
Yeah, no.
That doesn't happen.
Never. Not even in their own series. Where was Kirk Burnett? Yeah, we don't know.
Riverside, Iowa.
Yeah. Or was it the Hall of the Ship? Or was it, Maryland? Actually, one of the funnier parts is the basis of Captain Kirk. The name comes from the famous Captain Kirk of the naval captain. I think he's from the British Navy. But the actual personality comes from a guy named Jack Binns. Okay. And so Jack Sr., I got to sit through one of his stories of his great, it was just 4 frigates, and we went against the entire Nazi Atlantic fleet down off the coast of South America. A hurricane came through, and we didn't have a shot, so we went right into that hurricane, and they followed us into that trap. And then you hear him tell it, and it's like the most exciting story you could ever. They made a movie about it. Just And I wish he was still alive because he'd tell the story hilariously.
Yeah.
And like you'd be watching that movie like, oh, what's going to happen? And then I gave the order, shoot through the waves. And you hear the story, and it's just like you're like, holy crap! And he really was kind of the like the parts that I know of his life and seeing what his life was.
Mm-hmm.
He really was Captain Kirk.
Gotcha.
In every way. His daughter and I I remember growing up and just being like I love you, and she was like, yeah, I know, just okay, little Eddie. His son Jack Jr. He ended up on the fleet, became commander of a ship, and then she went through the academy, and she's actually the one who told me, don't go to the academy. And then she became commander of the fleet of a ship herself.
Oh, okay.
So, and so that was kind of like my fly on the wall thing, but an actual true person of history who was a basis of it. And he's a legend. So when Gene Roddenberry was writing the character, like, how's this person supposed to be? Right. And I've heard people actually say Jack Binns' name when they talk about that. And he knew, everybody knows of Jack Binns when you're in that kind of area because Gene Roddenberry was a naval officer. Right. And so that's where that basis comes from. He was a hell of a cool guy. He ended up having a Benz machine tool guy here in Cincinnati.
Okay.
So that's how I kind of knew him. My grandfather and father worked for him when I was a kid. Right. But get back to the continuity issues.
So you wanted to change it with your fan fiction?
Yeah, and so the idea was like because if you write something good enough, you could take it to them. The idea is always like, because I used to live in California. Okay. I was like, well, if I take this to them, maybe they might go, well, this sounds cool. We can start over again and fix continuity. And then they've gotten worse and worse and worse as time's gone on. So it's still kind of like, all right, how do you really fix this? But one of the things I did was start this like really short story of where basically Q is killed.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Wow.
And the universe is being destroyed. Okay. Now, part of the story is you're following Q's son as he's rolling around trying to get people to help.
Q's son Q.
Yeah, that Q. But not to be mistaken by Q.
Right.
Or Q2.
Yeah. Don't want to mix Q's up.
But the Q that everybody knows, he's killed. And he's killed by, Silent is his name from the original series. He's kind of a Q-esque character that they never quite...
Squire of Gothos. Oh my God.
He was played by Liberace.
Yes. All right. My brain is just not functional. So go ahead.
But I kind of had it where and as the story goes, is that he's still pissed off at Kirk. And he's grown up and he's like, I got grounded because of you. And so he's just destroying everything. And so
Trelawney.
Okay.
Yeah, Trelawney.
I'm horrible with names, so it's okay. But he's destroying everything. He kills Q. Mm-hmm. And you find out as the story goes on that Q has been training Picard to defeat him. And so what ends up happening is Q's son is killed, or essentially is to believe he's been killed. Okay. His entire continuum is wiped out. You end up in the story, they go to the continuum, and it's just like a puzzle falling apart around them. Mm-hmm. So they get out of there, and they're like, what's happened? And all the Q, you see them, they're all like pillars of ash that are just falling apart when you touch them. Right. So like really powerful stuff happened. And then basically, as the universe is crashing around them, Picard is fighting this guy. Okay. And Worf's with them. And Worf's got a batholith made from the hull of the Enterprise. Oh,
that's pretty bad. That's badass. Yeah.
And you're like what could you make it of? A little bit. This part's from the Enterprise C because it was willing to die for everyone, and the Enterprise D because it will always be with me. Oh. And so it's just this he forges this thing, and then he gives it to Picard because he gets killed. Mm-hmm. And so Picard's of course fighting him. He's got this sword that's really weird, and the guy I'm going to say his name wrong because I keep messing up. But anyway, so
Trelawney.
Yeah, Trelawney. Yeah. He goes and he breaks Picard's sword. Okay. And because at a certain point where Picard kind of puts everything together on it, right? And he takes his comm badge and puts on it. Well, the comm badge is actually Q. And there's this other thing on there that's Q's son. So it's all these Qs have given him things that he puts onto the handguard. Okay. And then Trelawney goes and he takes Picard's heart. He's like, you know what? I'm tired of you. he's got the little blade in his hand. He takes his heart and he's like, I have your heart. And he stabs it. And he's like, ha, you don't have your heart. And of course, Picard starts laughing. And he's like, why? And he looks at the heart and you see the knife blade hole in it. And he squeezes it. It's bleeding. He's like, I didn't stab it there. And then Picard hits him right in the side and twists. And then all the Q's powers go into him and kill him.
Interesting.
And then the universe is restarted.
Yeah.
And then it's just like at the end, it's just Q sitting there going to his son. He's like, I'm glad you were able to do this. And he's like, well, how did you know that Jean-Luc would be able to do this? He's like, I've been training him all of his life, you know?
Yes.
And like the only one in the universe who would be strong enough. And that's why all these things happen. Like you have to have your heart taken out. You have to be the person this and that because this guy's going to make the mistake of thinking.
Now, you know who I would love to see in Star Trek Picard? I think everyone would. Q. We've got to get Q in there somehow, some way. It would just be right to have John Delancey come back and do that.
And it would be nice to see him if he comes in there doing something, and then because we already know Picard's got that Alzheimer's like thing going on, and it'd be kind of interesting to have him go and Q be like, you know, oh, by the way, you know, just to let you know, yeah, in that one future you have this, but I like you too much for you to forget who I am, you know. And
I don't think you could ever forget.
Well, you know, he was like having those issues, but so in the story after that happens, and there's like a fresh reboot of everything, and then Enterprise happens, so I kind of redid everything because I didn't like how Enterprise did it. And so I kind of go, well, how would the Vulcans actually behave if they came here? Some Vulcans are going to be like corporate people. They're going to want us to go and do trade with them. So they want us to build our own ships. And no, we have to build our own ships. Oh, pardon me. And then there's also that ring warp enterprise that exists.
Right.
And I was like, okay, so the government doesn't want us to have warp 5, but they're going to give us a couple warp 5 ships. We just have to have the power plants enough to build it. Right. So I have in my story, it's like they give us 5 warp 5 ring ships. One of them is Enterprise. And as this is going on, that's when we run into the Andorians, because the Andorians think it's a Vulcan ship. And that Enterprise is lost protecting colonists on their way to a colony that the Andorians mistakenly attack.
I see.
And then after that, the Andorians give a couple ships, and we're able to reverse engineer those warp drives.
Right.
And of course, these are 1,000-year-old ships that are 1,000 years old.
Right.
Nobody cares about them. Like, we're so sorry to hear you take this.
Yeah.
And then Dr. Archer goes and looks at, this is what I'm missing here, because that's Archer's father who actually developed them.
Yes.
So they build the first ship, which is the NX-01 Dauntless, and they launch it. And the way I've written it is that they almost hit Vulcan because the ship goes so fast, none of their gauges work.
Wow.
And they pick up a signal saying, stop. And when they come out of warp, they're like almost hit something else, and they're like, whoa.
Yeah.
So the Vulcans have to give them new gauges and other things, and they come back to Earth, and they're like, let's tweak that power down a little bit.
Yes.
And then they get back to Earth, and they're like, the first Warp 5 ship. And this is a much smaller ship than even Enterprise is. It's the basic design, but it's way smaller.
Okay.
And then going with the idea of what they were doing, which is the space shuttles. Enterprise is built, and it's different than the rest of the ships enough that if you were close to it, you would see the differences.
Okay.
But it's the test bed ship, so it's basically like a hollow shell. There's systems in it that they're testing, but it's not meant to go to warp. And then Archer, of course, is the captain of it.
Right.
And because they have to have a captain, and so the line that's built from it is the Columbia line, and it is a Enterprise's number is
1701.
No. In the way I've got it. So it's because in the Navy, ships are commissioned in class. So a DD is a destroyer. A DD G is a guided missile crew destroyer, and so on. So this is a Warp 5 ship that's experimental. So it's a WVX.
Okay.
And then the Columbia class is a WVC. And then there's others, like I was going online, I was like finding all these designs I really liked. And I was like, the Intrepid would be a frigate. I don't like how they had the warp nacelle so far forward on it. So I was like, okay, here's my idea.
So you're taking your naval knowledge and mixing it with Star Trek and kind of doing it. This is how I would do it.
And then there's also the safety thing too, because remember, warp nacelles can't be right next to your bridge or your crew.
That's correct.
Irradiated. So then on that Intrepid, it's like Intrepid's launched, they get irradiated, get sick, and then they pull the nacelles back. So this is what the final one would look like. And why it has the fins on the nacelles is because it's so small. Mm-hmm. They build it in on planet, and then they launch it, and it can land on a planet.
Okay.
Whereas the Columbia class can't. And then there's the other classes, and so you have cruiser, frigate, destroyer, and then there's a battle crew.
Right.
And I was like, oh, I like these designs, you know. And but the Enterprise, the inside of the Enterprise is redone. So Enterprise has a traditional Warp 3 core,
okay,
which is on one side of engineering, and then the other side has the Warp 5 core.
So you've got a dual core in engineering ship, okay.
The shuttle bay, and then like, and I was kind of going through it like, oh yeah, this would be a great idea, because later there's a reason why all this is going into this. So later on, when they want to go and put a new warp core into it, they unbolt the hangar bay and pull it out, and then they put the warp core in, and then the hangar bay goes back in.
Okay.
And so I haven't lost you there.
No, I get it. I get it.
And I went through like the designs, because I hate the designs on that ship, because it's like, here's your quarters, here's your, you know, and then they don't have any room for food or supplies or, enlisted quarters should be like at least 4 people in it, not just 2. But
they kind of made that a little more realistic. You remember in Star Trek 6, The Undiscovered Country?
Oh yeah.
When some scenes in the crew quarters, Excelsior, and on the Enterprise, they showed crew quarters where you've got people in bunks.
And those racks are more along the lines of like a World War II ship.
Right. It was very World War II.
And I didn't like how Voyager handled that, because they used those scenes again like, any officers can be sleeping in those? No. I was like what are you doing? We're getting a quick sleep before our shift change, And I was thinking to myself, hey, if I came back to my berth after a shift change and one of my lieutenants was sitting in my rack snoring away, I'd been like, get out of there, Daisy. They did do that, and it was a little bit better. But I think the Defiant was kind of the first one that I saw that I really liked. Yes. And those were junior officer quarters, and I was like, yeah, that makes sense, because junior officers would be in those 2 racks, and they're actually more representing what you would actually see in a real Navy.
Okay.
But you'd have like an officer quarters. Archer's quarters are about right, because of his office and his quarters. And,
yes.
And then why he has a dog on board a spaceship, I don't know, which just seemed kind of funny. But
where did Porthos go to relieve himself? Was he toilet trained?
Well, they could have had like a spot. They should have had a spot with some garden on board, but there's really nowhere where they have like a greenhouse on Enterprise. But I looked through some stuff, and I was like, well, you could put like an area here with it. But I mean,
did they? Haven't I? Correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe I had seen some movie somewhere in passing. It was on a naval ship, and the captain someone had a pet. I remember seeing a dog.
Yeah, in classic history, there are naval ships that have.
And I get the idea that they're, put a dog on the ship because, it'll be.
It's calming for the captain.
It's calming, it's cute, et cetera, et cetera. But it's an idea that doesn't work because if you're in space all the time.
If you're on a carrier, you're out to sea all the time, most of the time.
Right.
But if you're on a carrier, you got enough room, like you can walk around the hangar bay or walk around the flight deck. And when you're not doing flight operations, there are movies you'll see where you see people running on the flight deck. That does happen. You see them running in the hangar deck. That does happen. And sometimes it's a challenge, because you have to run it in a maze to avoid, there's chains and you're hitting your head on stuff.
Right.
Someone's moving ordnance through the hangar bay, and that really does happen. Mm-hmm. And there are gyms everywhere. But I always was like I hate the turbo lifts. Always like the idea that there's a full lap or ring in the ship that people can run on.
So no turbo lifts on your version of your ship and your fan fiction?
Well, the Enterprise is the first ship that's supposed to have a turbo lift because they're testing it.
Okay.
And so it's really just for the command officers. So it's going to go from your bridge down, from the bridge all the way down to the guest quarters, which is on the lower deck, below the torpedo banks. And then it goes back to one of the docks where you dock in,
Okay.
and then back to engineering, so they can go and quickly run back and forth. And medical is down. I mean, it's in the core of the ship, so
Right.
you just went down. You could check on anybody that got sick. So that would have been just a skipper only thing.
Okay.
And I was like, oh yeah, this is how you do it, because you don't want like Enterprise D when you look at that blueprint, where there's more spaces for turbolifts going around the ship than there are hallways.
Okay, you're right. I never thought about that. Well, there's that, and then there's the
There's no stairs.
right, no stairs at all. And there's then you go to Discovery, and you've got this enormous, crazy. Where the hell could this even be on the ship?
Yeah, I saw that one scene where they're like
turbo lift.
they're looking at it and they're like, oh, well, that's where all the money goes. And I was like,
What is
that?
Right, it is. It's ridiculous.
It's the J.J. Abrams. It's bigger, like
it's bigger, it's cooler, it's better. It looks nice.
Neat. Yeah,
right.
You're like, you know,
it's this big, and there's been discussions online on like just where in the hell in the ship could this massive space be?
Yeah.
And so yeah, it was cool to look at, sure, but then once you
think about it,
once you turn your brain back on, and then it's okay, that makes no sense to have this huge chasm of
yeah, why we have the beast flying or the vortex flying through the middle of the ship, and you're like, well,
it looks like an amusement park.
Officers are getting sick all the time, like, I don't know what I had, you know, it's like that seafood calamari, you know.
Well, it's either that, or you have the turbo lifts in the Kelvin timeline where you can get from around the engineering / docking area to the bridge within 4 seconds.
Yeah, and it's like,
and a ship that is the size of the Enterprise D. So
actually, it's bigger than the Enterprise D.
A little bit bigger, yes.
And because I remember, because they were talking about like the 1701 is supposed to be the size lengthwise of the CVN 65.
Okay.
And then Enterprise D is supposed to be the size of Paramount's entire studio.
Mm-hmm.
And they were talking about that, and they said, oh yeah. And then you see like these things now where they're like only 1,000 people were on that ship, and like this is how much space they actually took up.
I've seen those. Yes.
And it's just like, yeah, because I always thought like the Enterprise, I remember reading somewhere where like the original Enterprise had like 1,000 or 2,000 crew on it, and then they're going, no, there's only 500. You know, the carrier has 5,000. When I was on the Nimitz, it was 5,555 people, and that's what the food stores in that ship were absolutely huge. I can tell you, 5,000,
over 5,000 people on
a carrier. Yeah.
On a carrier.
Air Wing, and the Air Wing is half of that, or a little bit less than half, to be honest. And then you have contractors, civilians, and Marines.
Okay.
And the occasional Army Ranger that they bring on board, and there's some stories about them that are just kind of like, when are they leaving? Good. Could it be now?
So really, so you're saying the Enterprise should have been the size to have been able to accommodate
5,000 people.
5,000 people.
And if you look at it, like the storage spaces for food and stuff, like a modern carrier, when I was on the Nimitz, or the Carl Vinson, which is a Nimitz class carrier, we could go out to sea if they stored things properly and they got the right food. You could be out for 6 months without any problems.
Just out on the water.
Just out in the water floating. That's ordnance, it's food, that's toilet paper. They might tell you to use less toilet paper. Cigarettes, dip are the first things that disappear.
Okay.
You're not allowed having a Bic lighter.
I can see that.
The reason why is because a Bic lighter can be turned into a bomb. So when you take a piece of tape on a Bic lighter, I'm probably gonna get a bunch of people in trouble because they're gonna do this.
I've had those bastards explode on me.
Well,
times.
You light it, you pull the thing down, and you just let it sit.
Yeah.
And once it heats up the metal and starts melting the top, then the fumes come up and it explodes. So they don't let those on the ship. So you have to use a Zippo.
Just disclaimer, Beyond Trek Productions is not responsible for any injuries that happen in your home due to Ed's homegrown big bomb thing.
Well, that's not the two 9-volt batteries plugged into each other, or that's how you pull up a lock off something. That's a messy way of blowing a lock off something too. I would not do that.
We're going to teach you all kinds of things here.
Oh yeah, there's all kinds of fun stuff. When I went, because there was all these storage areas, and there's one that has all the coffee. And the Navy has its own coffee, which is weird in itself. And I wish I had stole more.
The Navy has their own coffee.
They have a contract with a plantation in South America for coffee.
Oh wow, you're serious?
Yes, and it's for like the next 200 years. They went around the world tasting coffee, some officers, and they said, this is the best coffee. And I'm going to tell you this. That was the damn best coffee I've ever had.
Really?
It is. Oh, it comes in you just get like a square cardboard box, right? It's got 2 cans in it. So the top, they've got a little circle on there, just like a regular folder. Right. So you can take a can opener to it to open it. We just take like a survival knife and like who cares? As long as the plastic lid goes back on it, it keeps it fresh. You don't care. It's pre-ground. Okay. You get it, and it's like this tall.
Now I want to try it. Now I'm very curious.
And like I've talked to people, and they're like, "Yeah, we still have those. And it's really good coffee." And it's like, and I don't think it's the fact we were out to sea that made it so good. Because I had like bags of like Jack Daniels and Jim Beam coffee that I joked around about. Right. And I put it on top of our coffee maker, and everybody knew they were mine. It was just like double-sided tape so that they don't fall off because you're rocking. Yeah. And everybody was just like, "God, that's fine." Admiral came through like, whose coffee is it? Well, that's one of our parachute riggers. That's for when we have a really bad day. He's like, the Admiral's like, "Oh, is that near?" Let me know when you make a pot. And that was like the rule. If we have to make a pot, yes, I want a cup. Okay. And I was like, make sure I get the first cup. Yeah. Because it's my coffee. Well, they messed up and they didn't give me the first cup. So we pulled into port back home. Mm-hmm. All the officers bought me these packs of this coffee. Like, "We're so sorry. Right. You are our favorite parachute rigger." But the cans, you get these cans, and when you first start deployment, you go downstairs and get 1 or 2. Mm-hmm. Well, we were hiding them in our shop, and because we had lockers in our shop. So you'd open a locker, you'd find all kinds of stuff stashed away. Before we left, I remember going and I had a backpack, and everybody's like, "I need to borrow your backpack." And I said, "What for?" "I'm going to go out in town and buy a couple cases of Marlboros." Right. I was like, "Okay." Guy doesn't smoke. All right. Okay. So the locker next to mine is just full of Marlboro and dip cans. And he's got like 3 padlocks on this. One of the guys in my shop actually dipped. So he was like, "I will sell you one, but if I catch you stealing it, I'm going to throw you overboard." Right. And it's like, okay, And I came into the shop, and there's a pneumatic bolt cutter they have. Mm-hmm. And my buddy's sitting there. He's like, do it. It's like, "Where do you get these goddamn padlocks from? I need some dip." Because we ran out of dip. And so.
Where was he?
Not thinking about the fact he's going to need some dip for deployment. Because what they tell you is, "Oh yeah, every weekend we'll be in another city or somewhere else." Okay. And so you look at the schedule and you're like, yeah, we're not doing anything until you get to the middle of the Gulf, and that was it. And then someone from Saudi Arabia decided to fuck everything up for everybody. Because that was 9/11. Right. And we were out at that time.
Oh, you were?
Oh, yeah. We were about ready to pull into the Persian Gulf. Mm-hmm. And then we watched 9/11 happen at dinner time. So, and I was like right after dinner when the second tower fell. And I remember Master Arms talking about a bombing. I was thinking they're talking about like someone playing some tape from back in the 90s. And I was like, yeah, whatever, And then everybody's like, "We're at war, so don't freak out." But, yeah, we did. So like after that, like we got no resupplies unless we absolutely needed it. Like you didn't get your package from home unless the resupply was coming in. And everybody's sitting there emailing their family or calling their family. And then River City was engaged. In River City, you can't talk to anybody. So there's cell phones on the carrier. There used to be, or not cell phones, but pay phones. So you had to get a calling card. And it was like $100 calling card. and you'd get one of those, and like in 15 minutes it was used up.
Right. Right.
So it's like, I don't have long to say this. I love you. I need toilet paper, cigarettes, dip, and pens that work. Okay, nothing else. Just send me those. All right, love you. Bye.
And that makes you wonder just how much room they had for supplies and whatnot on these ships, especially in the original series time frame of it. So now
The refits, I don't know if you saw the refits, but the secondary hall, once you get underneath engineering, it's like in between engineering and the botanical garden. That's all supposed to be storage space.
okay,
And that's why you see all those carving containers being put in there. And I was always saying, like, yeah, that's not enough. They're not packing this full, but they never went on any big deployments. So I imagine, because I always thought, because like I imagine like them doing a series at some point, like they would do it like an air, or like a submarine. And
Right.
submarines, they don't have space for a lot of storage, but they will be underwater for literally 6 months without rising.
I could not
So
be.
hallways, when you go in the hallways, like you don't want to be too tall. Like I could not go on a submarine.
Yeah, I'm too tall for that as well.
Yeah.
6'5". I'm not going to get on the sub.
But oh no, you fit perfect.
Yeah.
Don't worry, you'll sleep between the torpedo tubes. It'll be okay. On a submarine, they take the cans from the food and they put all the ones that are the same size. So all the Campbell soup cans are all next to each other, so you don't have weird sizes.
Okay.
And the hallway will be lined with soup cans or different food cans. So as they need it, they just go out in the hallway and they pick it up and then they open it. So at the end of deployment, they might have to go walk down the end of the hallway to get food for galley duty, or for the galley to cook up. But and that's what I always heard a joke is that's when they know they have to come back up for air. Is when the hallway runs out of food, and then it's all they've got their stuff in their storage bin. But yeah, when you watch the shows, you're like, oh yeah, well they didn't go to the cafeteria. They didn't show the cafeteria until Star Trek 6.
That's right.
And I did remember reading that there's a cafeteria. It's over here. And what happens is that when they cook it, they would put it in like turbo lift little things, and then whatever you requested would zip up the window, and that's what you got. And then in Star Trek 6, if you read the technical manual of it, they said they had a transporter. So it was like a pre-replicator. They would cook the food, put it in there, and then they would hit the button, and it would go into a buffer. And then when you wanted it, you would hit the button up top, and it would rematerialize it.
Okay, so you're getting your food beamed to your room.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Well, not to your room, but to the cafeteria.
Gotcha.
And I was like, it seems like a little too much work because you really eat, like when you're on a carrier, everybody eats at the same time. And like the Carl Vinson had, you had 2 lines in the main cafeteria.
Okay.
2 lines on the secondary cafeteria. And the secondary cafeteria was like hamburgers, hot dogs, French fries. And that was usually a shorter line. Then the officers had their cafeteria. And then the chiefs had theirs. So there was quite a few places to eat at them. But,
Gotcha.
and then the admiral had his own personal mess as
Right.
well.
I'm sure he did.
But
Now, have you done? How many stories have you done? A book? Is it just?
I've just got like really rough drafts on stories because what
Okay.
happens is like I had to do the reboot on like the Enterprise because I was like, okay, I don't like what's been going on with Kirk because J.J. Abrams did Kirk. And someone said, well, why don't you write your own Kirk story and show it? And so I was like, okay, sure. So I have this thing where like, how did Kirk get into Starfleet? Why did he go to Starfleet? He went in because his dad was in Starfleet. Makes sense.
Right.
So in the story, I have it that his dad is the first officer, Robert Eagle,
Okay.
who is the first captain of the Enterprise. And that Kirk gets to see, like the story kind of gets a little weird. This story is really weird. So time is messed up. And I always envisioned if this was a movie,
Right.
the trailers would be for one movie.
Mhm.
And then when the movie would come out, you would see what happens to change the timeline. And that first movie that you saw you were going to see, that no longer exists. And then new trailers would come out later, so it wouldn't be like a surprise to people. But what happens is the time traveling goofballs of Enterprise, they're mad, so they go and do hijinks to ruin Kirk's life because they want to destroy the Federation.
Oh my. Okay.
Okay. So what they do is George Kirk talks to his son about finding this ship.
Okay.
And they find this ship that's very powerful in this spot. And I was like Gene Roddenberry did Andromeda. Well, imagine if they found this ancient ship that looks like Andromeda, that's super powerful, and could have defended Earth. And it's just Kirk and Spock and a couple other people get it working. And it comes out dry dock, and that's what they use. So that's the initial story, to defend Earth from an alien fleet.
Right.
What happens is George Kirk and these other guys who find the ship, they're attacked, and the ship is damaged.
Okay.
So it can't be used at all. And then in their more present time, when Kirk's more grown up, they have this new fleet that comes in. And the fleet that was going to attack Earth, they see this other fleet and they're like, no, it's okay, guys. So
no, we'll move along now.
so they go, so this fleet comes in, and the idea is that the Federation fleet is peaceful, so they don't have photon torpedo launchers.
Okay.
They have phasers, and this guy's fleet, the phasers have no effect on them. So the entire armada, or whatever fleet you want to call it, is decimated.
Wow.
And then the Klingons go in, and they're decimated. And so the story goes on, like the Enterprise is with this other fleet that's on the other side of Federation space. They do have torpedo launchers on it, and their phasers are different. And they are like, okay, we've got a signal, we got to get over here to defend Earth. Now, there's a lot of like spies that are kind of floating around that are trying to keep them from going fast. But as the story goes, so Kirk, of course, is in trouble when all this stuff goes on because he hacked the system so he can win. And everybody's mad. Spock's there. And the reason why Spock's there is he couldn't be on the ship he's supposed to be on because he was going through his 7-year itch. And he was trying to deal with it and get the drugs and everything. And they're like, okay, well, we're going to do this with you and you'll be okay. So he comes out of it and they're like, okay, well, while you're here, you have to defend this idiot. And he's like, okay, well, him and Kirk bond over things. And he's like, oh, you remind me of my brother to a degree, kind of weird stuff. Well, then stuff kind of goes south. Well, when everybody sees stuff go south, Kirk's like, I remember a story my dad told me about the ship. It's actually at Jupiter Station. They found that we could defend Earth with this. And Spock's like, and there's a couple other people in there. They go, okay, so they go to Jupiter Station, they find the ship, they see that it's been just absolutely devastated and destroyed. And Kirk's like, what are we going to do? And he's sitting there, and some guy shows up, and he's like, James T. Kirk, James Tiberius Kirk, I have a message for you. And he's like, whatever, just got to steal from Back to the Future when you can. He opens it up, and it's a letter. There's executive orders that Archer did as president that no one has ever seen what they were. There's like 200 of these orders.
Okay.
This is Order 6.
Okay.
Executive order to Captain James T. Kirk, James Spears Kirk, to take command of the USS Enterprise, WVX 01. And he's like, where the hell? The ship's been destroyed. Because the whole idea is that after the Romulan War, they're going to replace it with Ship 12 of the Columbia class.
Okay.
And they're going to have a new ship for it because it's taken a lot of beatings. And they retire it, they gut it for parts, and it's put away in storage, and everybody's forgotten about it. And then 12 is destroyed by unknown sources. Because 12 is destroyed, they don't launch Ship 13, where the Ship 13 comes into a bit of the story here. So he's like, where am I supposed to? And the second page says, look behind you, above the horizon. So he looks behind him, and he's like, the horizon. Well, the ship right in front of him is USS Horizon. And he looks above it, and there it is, docking bay clamps docked to the Enterprise.
Wow.
So he runs over, they run over there, and he's like, there's in the notes, like, I've given you everything you need. The ship's gutted, so there's no wiring, there's no electronics, it's just hull and a chair and a jacket, and it's Archer's jacket. And he's like, okay, what do we do?
Right.
And so these guys friend with him, he's an engineer. He's like, well, this is actually pretty good for us. So we don't have to test everything. We just know everything needs to get replaced.
Okay.
So they're all going through like, well, how are we going to get this fixed? There's not enough of us. Well, we need to get the enlisted to help us. All right, how do we get the enlisted to help us? Challenge coins. Well, they go to Archer's office, opens the door, there are boxes of challenge coins, and like lighters and patches and all kinds of all the promotional stuff sitting there. He's like, oh, everything I need. Okay. So as the story goes, it's like everybody goes to like, there's all kinds of stuff going on. They get the warp drives from Ship 13. They get spare parts that they actually built enough parts for 3 ships. When they were building Enterprise, they get all these parts to repair anything that's been damaged. They get a new warp drive. They make a deal with the Marines because the Marines are trying to steal stuff, which goes into Spock's history. And Spock's grandfather, from his mom's side, where his grandfather from his mom's side is the 3rd Commandant of the Earth Marine Force. So he has this token, and whatever you ask for, the Marine Corps has to give it to you. And so, because they were stealing the warp core. So he puts the coin down, and they're like, no, you can't have this. This is from Commandant. I forget what Amanda's last name is. But, and he's like, that was my grandfather. And so the Marines are like, oh, shit. So the story kind of goes on. They get the ship launched, and it comes out, and it's like supposed to be like a scene like from Star Trek 3, where the Enterprise comes by. And then I've got like this Doctor Who character who comes in like, oh, you want to see some hope and some good times? And there's this kid, everybody's freaking out because there's this enemy fleet coming.
Right.
And it goes, this kid, you should look out that window if you want to see something really cool. So the kid goes up to the window, and of course the Enterprise comes by. And everybody thinks it's Admiral Archer come back.
Right.
So it launches, it goes out. They don't have enough torpedoes, fuel, or anything to really be a threat. So the enemy fleet's gone to this one planet, and a little bit of a detour, they can go to where the Klingon fleet is. And they can use Klingon torpedoes on Enterprise. So they go there, and they end up running into this leader of this Klingon fleet who's still alive. He's got a goofy title that doesn't really make sense. Sounds a slight bit Russian.
Okay.
And he's like, Enterprise, this and that. And they go through the whole thing. And so they get the torpedoes, they get a bunch of Marines. They've already got they got a bunch of Klingons to get on board. So they have some Marines, Federation Marines, or Earth Marines. They've got Federation SEALs. And then they've got this entire deck packed with Klingons.
Right.
And they're like, what are we going to do with these Klingons? And it's like, the only thing we have to drink is prune juice here.
Oh.
And this leader of the Klingons is like, don't call it prune juice. What is it? What's that one thing? Rhinos? Oh, yeah, it's rhino blood. Just drink it, And the Klingons are like, yes, we love this.
Yeah.
So
they love blood wine, and Worf is a big fan of the prune juice.
Yeah, and so the ship actually has a whole bunch of stuff wrapped around all weapons and tanks and stuff that they're going to use on this planet to get the civilians off the planet. And Enterprise is actually going to be a distraction. So Enterprise is going to distract the fleet away from them saving civilians on the planet and try to cause chaos. So when they get there, they find a ship, another ship design that I kind of came up with, and it was in dry dock, and the rest of the space station got blown away, but the ship's still there, and the crew are there, and it's got weapons, and the crew is trying to figure out, how do we power up and not get our asses handed to us?
Right.
And then everybody's trying to think at the same time, like, how do we get these guys on the planet without being seen when they're coming through the atmosphere?
Right.
And they're like, oh, we're going to push this dry dock out. And then when that happens, you're going to power up your ship. You're going to take your torpedoes and phasers, and you're going to fire on the ground forces to disrupt them while everybody else is going down. And then there's a quick rundown. There's a huge battle. They also pick up a helmsman, a helmsman Benjamin. Okay. And then there's another gentleman on the ship as well, which is another reference back to the original series. So as it goes through, George Kirk and Robert April are on the Enterprise. They, of course, find out that his son, has taken command of the USS Enterprise, and they are going in harm's way, and they aren't going to it'll be hell and high water if an Enterprise goes into battle alone.
Right.
So they've got a guy who actually invents the actual stack or the tower warp core, and he's got a prototype that he's been building. So they put it together, and they're like, so what will this do? And he's like, well, in theory, it won't blow us up. So they end up doing almost transwarp drive on the old warp cores. And there's, of course, side effects to this where they actually burn the warp drive, the warp cells out.
Oh.
But they get there in time
Mm-hmm.
to save the Enterprise's ass.
Okay.
And the Enterprise and them leave the planet, and they also find out that the Enterprise has burned out some parts of its warp drive to the other Enterprise. So 01's got problems, 1701's got problems, and then they do an attack in a cloud, and then they leave that thinking that, well, maybe we can keep doing something.
Right.
And then they get caught, and they get pinned in. And then you find out that they do the Enterprise, 1701's computer core is wiped, completely wiped by the aliens. And then the processor is destroyed on 01. Well, on 01, there's a guy who's working there, and he's Gary 6. And he goes and he gets down to the computer core, pops open a pen, and he sticks it into the drive, and it starts lighting up. And the processor comes back on. So the pen is now the processor. I'm not familiar I don't know if you're familiar with Gary 7 and his pen. So he's like, okay, all right.
Magic pen.
And he's like, my brother told me to make sure to take care of this guy. And then Lieutenant Benjamin, who's the helmsman, he's got a thing he puts up on top of the con, and you can see it's doing little things. So it's sending a signal. You find out that it's sending a signal to 1701,
Right.
uploading a new hard drive, and when it comes up on the screen, it's the next generation logo as a starter screen. And everybody's like, what's this?
Yeah.
And they're like, don't worry, it's loading up. We might have computer core at some point.
Right.
But there's a ship they destroy at a certain point where it kind of opens up a doorway. And they're sending signals. They're still in bad shape. They're about to get blown away. And Kirk's like, all right, I swear I never do this. He's like, we're going to send a signal out. And the Klingon's like, okay. And he's like, this is Captain James T. Kirk of the Earthship Enterprise. If you can hear this, we need your help. We are about to be destroyed. It's bad, but if you can't get here, get to Earth.
Right.
Well, torpedoes are fired, things blow up, and they're all sitting bored and like, oh, we're still here. And they look out, they pan down the view screen, and it's the Enterprise D.
Wow.
Because it's come through this wormhole, the time-dimensional wormhole,
Gotcha.
for this time ship, because these are the time travelers.
Yeah.
And they get a signal on Picard, and he's like, Enterprise never stands alone. Then the Excelsior shows up, and he goes, you don't know me, and I'm not going to tell you my name, but Enterprise never stands alone, nor does Captain Kirk.
Right.
And then the Enterprise B shows up. And
Jeez.
Sulu's daughter
Now
is the
everyone-
captain. So everybody starts showing up. And even the Defiant shows up, and Worf's in charge of it. And he's like, the Enterprise does not stand alone, So all the ships are being protected, and then the Abrams Enterprise shows up to protect 1701.
Oh, wow.
And then
Very interesting.
so everybody's kind of there. And then they kind of all have to leave because now everybody's back online. They're flying around fighting, and their doorways are disappearing. So they're all going. And then now it's just 1701 and 1. And they're like, what are we going to do? And then the fleet shows up because after they see April and 1701 fly away, they're like, why are we sitting here? And part of the story is that I haven't really hit on is that they find the spies in Starfleet, and that the admiral was one of these spies keeping things from happening.
Okay.
That's why they're going so slow. So the fleet shows up. There are 4 Federation class starships, which are the big bad boys from the original series that no one ever saw on screen.
Right.
But some of the parts of some of these ships look a little Excelsior
Okay.
because they're testing out those designs on Federation class. But they engage. The big bad guy shows up at a certain point, and I forget which point it is. And the bad guy is the Mirror Universe Kirk.
Oh.
And he's in command of the Exeter, which is it's Constellation class. Constellation class. But it's like, imagine the refit,
Right.
but way heavier armed.
Okay.
And he's pissed off because his empire's been destroyed by this Kirk. And they've got only a few planets. But he's like, if I kill you now, I don't have to worry about anything. So they end up killing, like everybody's fighting, and the ship is way powerful, but they end up beating them and destroying the ship. And there's some goofy torpedo that I came up with that the Klingons had. So at the end of the story, there's this whole battle on the planet that I haven't gone into detail where in the end of the battle, there's a guy who's like he's Klingon who lost limbs. He wanted to just be killed, and they gave him prosthetics and said, well, you can kill them, and then you have a better chance of getting into the afterlife. And he'd been given a weapon from somebody, and so what happens is he sits down and dies, and everybody takes their knives or their blasters or whatever, and they stick it on this thing where he's sitting at, and it's like, here, take mine and fight with it or whatever. But they get back to Jupiter Station. Everybody's happy, they're cheering. The fleet looks like hell, but now they know what they need to do to build up the fleet. And they go, and McCoy's in it. This is when you find out how McCoy and Kirk meet and why McCoy's on the Enterprise. This is a better story than the divorce story originally. But McCoy goes, when the Klingon got hurt, we took his blood sample. He's got a K-bar knife, and Kirk uses it at a certain point to kill somebody who's going to kill him, and they go back and forth. He goes, his blood type, it's really weird. And Kirk's like, okay, like how weird? He's like it looks like he's your descendant. And so you see this Klingon, of course, sitting at the bar, drinking prune juice, and a young man shows up in a captain's uniform next to him, but from the wrong era-ish. And he looks over, he's like, you're not wearing the right uniform. And he fixes it. And he's like, so you did your part of the deal? He's like, the Enterprise never stands alone, nor does a Kirk. Mm-hmm. And as long as one of us lives, there'll always be one to fight. And he goes, okay, well, it's time for my part of the deal. Mm-hmm. And he's like, okay, let's go do this. And he's like, all right. So then they're gone. And so the whole thing goes, and the next thing you see is there's a scene in there in which Kirk is on the planet. He's about to be beamed up to the Enterprise, where they go to the mirror universe. And the evil Kirk told him it. Right. And so now he's like, wait a minute. Hey, Scotty, can you send them a shuttlecraft? Okay, thank you. And then, so they don't have a mirror universe episode ever now. So now they can't collapse. We don't have all this crisis.
Okay.
But then the very last part of the story is and throughout this Klingon with this semi-Russian sounding name has always talked about his father being the greatest Klingon ever fought, ever be. And they was killed by these guys who they're hunting against now. They're fighting against. They kind of cowardly killed him. He could have beaten them, but he had been in this battle years before where he fought by himself for 40 days and 40 nights and defended this colony from this enemy. Yeah. And no Klingon would stand by him. And Kirk goes, well, what would you like to do? And he's like, if anything, I would stand by him, and fight. So he gets there. In the end, it's Worf standing there, uniform torn up, blasters out. He's got a bath lift, parts are broken off. And then someone comes up in the back and behind him. He looks, and they're Klingon. And it's the other Klingon. Okay. And he's like, oh, thank God. I don't want to fight alone, There's pretty good numbers. Like, today might be a good day to die, but I'd like to take a few more of them out. And they're kind of fighting. And he's like, who are you? Alexander, son of Worf. And like wails and lops some guys off. So this heads off. And then you see him pull out the knife. And he kills a guy with it. When the guy falls, you see on the handle, it says Kirk. So Alexander, so basically that's a side because Alexander's mom's half human. So you got a Klingon ambassador and a human ambassador. Mm-hmm. Who do you think is the human ambassador to be ballsy enough to bang a Klingon?
Ambassador, give me a hint.
Kirk. It would have to be Kirk.
Kirk. Okay. So Kirk would have been. I got you.
So Alexander is not just the son of Worf, but also the grandson or the great grandson of James D. Kirk.
That is interesting. That's very interesting. So
then that's just like hinted at, and that's it. And that's how he has this K-bar on him. from the Kirk family,
Okay.
which I end up having a reference to in a different story that I go on. But all the stories following it would actually be, and so at the end of the story, Kirk gets promoted
Mm-hmm.
from an ensign or from a cadet to lieutenant in the academy.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how he gets his first rank. So every following story I wanted to do was going to be him getting another rank until he got to be captain.
Okay.
And then the last one where he gets captain, they go, we've got, some orders for you to choose from. And one of the last scenes you see him is he's reading like orders, and one of them is for the Enterprise. And he's kind of like,
Yeah.
But then the rest of the stories I kind of do is like there's one where I was trying to do the economy of the Federation and explaining how replicators changed the economy, made it a socialist economy at the core of finance.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's like you still have regular commercialism on the outside,
Okay.
the rougher, the places where you don't have enough power to run all these replicators. Because I kind of was like, oh, replicators, pardon me, limitation is they use so much like the power.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why Janeway couldn't use them all the time to fix everything. And so that's what the difference is between a colony world and a core world.
Okay.
But then, and then it was like the Klingon Empire, how it works. And then I went into the fleet. I was telling you, it was like the lost fleets where they go to travel to start a new colony, and this entire colony fleet gets sucked into another galaxy, which I think you were probably looking more for. And that story is like what is the ancient race that has all the stuff in Next Generation? They do stuff in Deep Space Nine with them. They have the gateways that could travel between the worlds.
Yes. The Iconians.
Yeah.
The Iconians.
So they end up finding out the Iconians built gateways between galaxies.
Mm-hmm.
And so with the right signal and like things being put out, you could open it. So this colony fleet accidentally opens one, and they end up in this other galaxy. And that whole story is, I named that Frontier, because after USS Frontier, which is kind of like, I saw a design for a ship called Frontier online. And it was like a Galaxy class, but they moved the saucer section so it looked more like the rest of the ships with that kind of not destroying the warp barriers and stuff.
Okay. Yeah.
I thought perfect, because you could fit, probably 20,000 people on one of those things going to a colony world.
Right.
And families and stuff. It'd be perfect frontier ship. Oh, it's a frontier ship. Oh, Galaxy class. Oh, we got holodecks and stuff. And we got a huge track that you can run on, and you get stores and stuff and all this and that. And then they get somewhere and they're like, oh, this is not where we thought we were going to be. So that whole story arc is them trying to find out what happened, how they opened this thing, how they got there.
Okay.
And then they have to find out, they have to deal with this kind of enemy race that's there that doesn't like them. And there's a lot of ships that get destroyed. And basically you have this USS Frontier, and the Frontier is not really a combat ship, so they got to make it into a combat ship.
Right.
And then at the end of that whole thing, the idea is, we found our way back home, and they're able to get help and reinforcements from home. And which leads to what I wanted to do was a series called Kirk, which you have the Enterprise A. It's been kind of sort of refitted. It's still a museum ship. They're going to take it to, and there's a Klingon ship, the D7. They're going to take these to this new Federation outpost now in this other galaxy, because they've stabilized everything there. And they want them to have something of Federation history there. And so they go through the gateway and end up out somewhere else, not knowing it. And they're at one of these ancient Iconian planets that still has a shipyard and everything. And they find out that there's races, they're the most advanced ships there, but the ships are all badly damaged. And the space station goes, well, would you like us to build you a new starship? And Kirk is like, yeah, build me a Defiant, because we don't know what we're going to run into.
Right.
So they get this really powerful little Defiant, and the Klingons have a new D7 that's built that's way more modern.
Mm-hmm.
And they end up trying to unite everybody together to fight this race, and they're kind of using that same spore drive kind of technology that Discovery has, but it's like it's kind of, think like that ancient race from Star Wars where they use the star. They have like a star shipyard where they build all their ships, and it's like almost like a replicator. I forget it's the ancient Sith race. It might even be the same name. You're not big on Star Wars. You probably don't.
Not as much as Star Trek. So no, I don't have that name. But I get. I know what you're talking about. So yeah, these are interesting stories.
Yeah, it's the whole thing in it though is like Kirk, is he has to make these decisions, and then they go more into the fact that Alexander is a Kirk and that they're cousins, and that they never, no matter what happens, everybody knows together.
Right.
And I think that, and then out of that is the story was like Big D, which I talked about, where they run to an alien race to they disable replicators. And the bonds that replicators and transporters make. So everybody's dying and disappearing around the galaxy. And so the Enterprise D is the only ship they have left to do that can fight. So those are kind of like a couple of them. And I was just like, oh, yeah, that's
good stuff.
You write it, and then you're like, well, how much do you write before they go, oh, yeah, we like it, we don't like it.
Right.
So,
right. Well, hopefully that will get somewhere. And I like it. Those are good stories. And Ed, I really appreciate you coming in and sitting down.
How much time did I? Oh yeah. I probably filled up your entire hard drive.
Let's see. Oh, an hour. Yeah, an hour. Well, hard drive's got plenty of space, but
this is why Republicans are scared of me, because they're like, we don't want you giving your normal speeches that you give, because we don't have 4 hours for speech. They're not telling anybody here. I was telling them earlier about running for office and stuff, but I think that was probably one of the more interesting parts. They try to bring into Deep Space Nine, the politics of everything going on in the war. But I think Star Trek kind of flopped, or Star Wars flopped on it. Star Trek kind of tried to, but let's not get me started on that. I'll be talking. We'll talk about filibusters and warp drives and how everything fails.
Right. Yeah. Well, that's good. So, to all of our viewers and listeners, thank you. I'm BigJ. I'm here with my guest Ed, and come back again and watch our videos. Subscribe on YouTube. We're going to be getting back into doing some more regular stuff now that we're about to approach Star Trek Discovery and Star Trek Picard. So that will be very exciting, and hope to see everyone there with us.
We are Beyond Trek Podcast. Lower your inhibitions and surrender your years. We will add inspirational and hilarious Trek content to your day. Your attention will adapt to subscribe to us. Resistance is futile.